Welcome to the Thriving Misfits, the podcast where we celebrate resilience, embrace diversity, and challenge norms. I'm your host, Fyiona Yong, and in this episode, I'm honored to introduce Dr. Wanjiku, a dynamic public health nutrition researcher currently based in Penang, Malaysia. Wanjiku's incredible career has spanned 8 countries, including Kenya, Tanzania, Malawi, Malaysia, the Netherlands, South Africa, Denmark, and the US, where she has led impactful projects tackling food and nutrition insecurity, especially among vulnerable populations. Her expertise and passion for addressing undernutrition have made a lasting impact across continents, and her global perspective offers valuable insights into the future of public health. But beyond her professional achievements, Wanjiku brings a deeply personal lens to today's conversation. We'll explore her journey as a minority in many environments, often one of the few people of color in the room, and the complexities of being viewed as a diversity hire. She'll share her experiences of navigating these challenges with grace and resilience, while also reflecting on what it means to be an introvert in a world that often values extroverted qualities. Despite these hurdles, she has found ways not only to survive, but actually thrive in her field. And in addition to her professional and personal endeavors, Wanjiku is a dedicated wife and mother and an avid runner. Her commitment to running extends beyond personal fitness. She's completed several marathons as a tribute to her home country of Kenya, carrying her roots with her every step of the way. Welcome, Wanjiku. Welcome to the Thriving Misfits podcast.
Thank you, Fyiona. Glad to be here.
Fantastic. And, Wanjiku and we have come across just very recently. I think it was only in April this year that we met each other at the conference of your organization, of the NGO where you're working at. And we just instantly connected, especially when you told me that you're from Kenya. And I was in Tanzania just, not a few years ago, but in 2019 to climb Mount Kilimanjaro. And I was just so amazed by not your fitness level, but your dedication to running.
Yeah. Yeah, many people are amazed. Yeah.
Right. Now, Wanjiku, people would like to get to know you a little bit better. So let me just kick it off with some rapid fire round questions. So if you could run a marathon anywhere in the world, where would it be and which place best exemplifies an inclusive spirit you'd like to celebrate?
Fyiona, that's a hard question. I want to run everywhere. But immediately, I have a list. I think top of my list is not a marathon, it's an ultra marathon. That's close to 90 kilometers in South Africa. In South Africa, held every year in June. It's called the Comrades Marathon. And it's the oldest ultra marathon, at least in the continent of Africa. And I think the first reason I'd want to run is when I started running, and it's very recent, 2018, 16, 6 years ago, or maybe now 7, it looked like the most impossible thing that I could do. And that's also part of the reason that I ran, that it reminds me that I could do hard things. And this is one of those hard things I just feel I would want to conquer. But even more than that, conquer it in a country where I think has made a lot of strides in terms of celebrating the diversity that it represents in very many ways. I lived in South Africa. It's a beautiful country, very many cultures trying to embrace their diversity and live together. And what better way to celebrate that than join one of the oldest runs in that same country? So that would be my, the top on my list. I just have to get the fitness right. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm sure you will be able to do that very quickly. How often do you actually run?
I run 6 days a week. 6 days a week, and I have one rest day. But of course, the intensity of each run, the distance and intensity varies. It also, how much I run also depends on whether I'm training for something. But I do run 6 days a week. Yeah.
I mean, that's amazing, that discipline that you have, because not only are you running a lot, you are
Yeah.
also an extremely career driven lady I've met. And you also have five children,
Four
five,
children.
four
Four.
children.
Four
Yes.
children. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, then that's why I need the running. I need to be sane, right? But you know what? Running is really a metaphor for life. It's when you run, it's not just the physical that you're doing. It's many times silencing the voice of doubt. That you can do this hard thing, and telling your mind, no, you can, and allowing your body to listen to your mind. So allowing your mind to take over and not necessarily the other way around. And that's why I love running, because the lessons you learn in running, you can carry over to life. And I think even beyond that, it's the resilience, which is, for me, is an important piece, having working in environments that I'm often a minority, and so on. It's the resilience. It's for failing a lot of times and picking
Mm.
yourself up, and also giving yourself an opportunity to redefine what failing is. Often what initially see as failing in running, for example, that I didn't hit a goal pace, is really an opportunity to fine tune something, and allowing myself to develop different narratives for situations that would have otherwise gotten me down, and carrying that over to my work and to the home is what running offers me. So I do it, I think, beyond the physical and the health gains. It's that other piece of it. Yeah.
It's like part of your lifestyle. And I
Right.
like that you
Right.
mentioned that this carries into your personal life as well, whether in the workplace or at home. And this
Yes.
really resonates with me, because I've also never thought I would be able to climb, I think it's the third highest summit in the world,
Right.
and climbing or hiking up for 6 days without any
Mm-hmm.
showers, without any,
Mm-hmm.
proper toilets. I think
Yeah.
it just gives you that evidence that you can actually do it. But what you mentioned
Mm-hmm.
rightly is one of my mantras when I was climbing up the mountain. It was really about mind over matter. And
Right. Right.
the other one is, pole pole, slow, slow,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
one step at a time. You don't need to rush things.
No.
So
No.
I really
Yeah.
love that you mentioned that. It's so important that it's not only what we do for our fitness level, but it actually creates that resilience in us as well. And that
Mm.
we are much stronger than what we think we are.
Yeah, yeah. And Fiona, it's important that you say that. I know we're dwelling on the fitness piece, but it's what I found with running also is that when I started off, I mean, I really used to enjoy, and then I got into racing. And when I got into racing, at some point there, I started losing the joy of running. And the reason was because I focused so much on hitting a goal that I
Mm.
forgot to enjoy the journey, and forgot to see, that before I could run from this tree to the next, and now I couldn't do it, and now I can do it. And I wasn't seeing that. I was just, it's like when you are hiking on Mount Kilimanjaro, if you only focused on just how far you are from the summit, you're not enjoying the journey. But it's looking at, I've gotten from this point to the next point, and learning to celebrate the journey, and not so much for us who run, putting everything on the race. And if I don't hit the goal pace in the race, then I failed everything. Yeah. And again, back to that of redefining the narratives of what failure and success is and what it looks like. Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, can you tell us a little bit more about your childhood? So you grew up in Kenya. How did
Right.
your early experiences actually shape your views on diversity, equity, and inclusion, especially right now that you're focused around food and food security? How did that
Mm-hmm.
come about?
Okay. Well, I'll start with the end, that I never thought I would end up doing anything to do with food, right? When I was growing up. But how I grew up, two-parent home. I think my parents were really loving. We are five siblings, the girls at the end and the boys ahead. What was interesting about our family, and now I say this in hindsight, is there was a tension between raising us with modern values and sticking to the traditional values. My dad was highly educated, traveled all over the world, and in a sense made us believe equally, the boys and the girls, that nothing is impossible. Like, the way these traditional careers, the girls become, I don't know, more the care type careers, not the engineers and so on. No, my dad was not like that. It's, you can be a scientist, you can be whatever it is you want. And then my mom was a primary school teacher, and she did most of the care giving for us, because my dad was traveling a lot. So of course that modeled my perspective of what a woman's role in the family is, right? It's to make sure the children are fed, and to make sure, the family is okay in that sense, in terms of the care practices. And although she was a primary school teacher, I never saw her model that chasing a career is important, right? And maybe not a criticism to her, that it was more important for her to raise us, and that's a very important role. But I never saw her like in a formal career, like saying, oh, one day I want to become the principal. She had this primary school teaching job which she enjoyed, but she made it clear her primary role was to take care of us. So seeing my dad on the one hand saying I could chase a career, but having something else modeled, also later in life introduced a conflict in my mind on whether I'm doing the best and so on. So that's the first thing in terms of growing up. When it came to how we were a family who were assigned household tasks, right? So it's interesting, we talk about it with my brothers even now. The girls had to know everything, right? We cooked, we cleaned, we washed the cars, we had pets. Okay, I don't know in Africa if they're really pets. We had animals, like we had goats, rabbits, chicken, and the girls also had to do that. And looking back, and even we talk about it now as a family and laugh about it, is my brothers never had to cook and clean. They never had to prepare meals. They never had to wash dishes. They never had to, they did what in our society is viewed as male, right? They washed the cars, they fed the animals, but they never did the female whatever. So there was, I mean, very happy family, but and I'm saying this because of, I'm sure where the conversation will lead to is it introduced a bit of that tension. But I mean, when it came to school, very much encouraged to pursue the sciences by my father and my mother, and they really entertained my curiosity. I was always an extremely curious child. I was the annoying child who always asked why. Why does this work the way it is? I even asked, why aren't the boys the ones washing the dishes and the ones cooking? Why is it every time it's me and my sister changing turns, and why not them? Why is it when we had, because the typical breakfast for us was tea and bread, why is it that my brothers got the priority and they could take as many slices of bread as they could, but we could only take after they had, and often it meant there was nothing left for us, because yeah, they are boys and they eat much more, and there wasn't enough, and we had to go back into the kitchen and make pancakes and things like that. So
Did you
that's
ever get
how.
an answer to your question?
um I mean, the answer was, it's just the way it is. That's just how it is. That's how we do things in this family. And at that point, for me, it was an okay answer. It was okay to keep the peace, right? But internally, I was like, no, but why can't it be equal in this sense? So that tension. So that's how I grew up, and in the end, it happened that we all have somehow ended up in the sciences equally, and that we still talk about that in the family, about the difference in roles. And it's interesting, even now when we meet for parties, that shows up. I don't know if that answers your question about how I grew up. Yeah. Oh, and maybe I should add, in terms of the growing up, is went to normal schools, public schools, primary, secondary, and my first degree in Kenya. were all in public institutions. Yes.
Have you ever felt like a misfit in any type of environment when you were a child? Like, did you ever feel like you didn't belong?
Always, always. I felt okay. So first, I there was the lack of belonging because as as a family unit first, before even myself, because my father had moved from the village to the city, and from the family that he came from, he was among the first that moved. And of course, then the way he ran his family was a bit different, right? So there was that a bit of isolation and feeling a misfit when we had to interact with other members of the family and so on. And we tried our best. Um, and I did feel as a misfit when we changed schools. So there was a point where when I was in primary school, we had gone to a primary school a bit further from home. And there was a bit of civil unrest during the multi-party era in Kenya. And my parents decided to move us closer home so that we didn't have to experience the violence. And what happened is the school that I initially went to was how do I describe it? A bit more bougie. The first school that I had gone to spoke English. We never used Swahili, which is our national language, and so on. And when we went to this new school, they spoke a slang that is a corruption of Swahili and English, which we had no idea how is spoken. And so when I went to this school, I was viewed as feeling as if I'm better than this new school. And so I was a misfit in that sense. I've also always been a misfit because I've always been the shortest in the class.
Mm.
And also that I've always been someone when it came to schoolwork and classwork, because I just love to know, have been overly eager. I was always, the one in class asking the teacher all the questions when people want to go on break. So in that sense, I've been a misfit for a lot of my life. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, that resonates a lot with me because when I grew up in Germany in the 80s,
Yeah.
there were no other Asians in
Okay.
school. I
Yeah.
was the only Asian kid apart from my brother. But I
Right.
felt like it was much easier for him to integrate because as a boy, I don't know, the boys were just bonding, playing
Yes.
football. Whereas
Yeah.
for girls, and like similar to you, I was very much focused on, studying and getting good
Yes.
grades. I guess
Yes.
that's also a little bit of the Asian parenting there. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, I was definitely bullied much more. And because,
Mm,
looking differently and then
yeah.
focusing a lot on academia, which is, I
Yeah.
think, in Germany back in the days, or maybe even now, it's not
Yeah.
that much of a focus, right?
Yeah. And
Yeah.
maybe Fiona, I'll just add, you've just reminded me when you said about the misfit and also being in school and sharing your experiences. I think the place that shaped me and helped me um be cognizant about diversity and seeing people and trying to see everyone in situations and in a room was in high school. So I forgot to mention when I grew up in a very shielded family. How we grew up is my friends was my sister and my three brothers. That's who I knew my friends were. And because I just grew up around my family, the belief for me growing up was everyone is kind and everyone is nice and everyone wants good for you. And because when I came home and I did well, we had everyone celebrated, and that's what I knew, right? I never knew any other way. And then I went to high school and I'm like, oh, the world is not the world is not like this. And I felt a misfit because I was so naive about how the world operates, and that people can have agendas that are not necessarily about you, right? And for your own good, and people have different exposures and different um perceptions about what is good and what is fair and what is just, and that sometimes people have no qualms about being mean or unkind. And I had never experienced that, and that was hard for me. It was really hard. Yeah. Yeah.
Definitely,
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah.
But now you've basically transformed your adversities into an advantage, and
Yeah.
again, still a minority in the workplace, right? We talked a
Right.
lot about it being
Yeah.
perceived as a diversity hire. So what kind of personal experiences have actually shaped your understanding of DEI, diversity, equity,
Mhm.
and inclusion? And also, can you share any specific challenges that you've faced in the workplace being a minority, and also how did you navigate them?
Oh, Fiona, can I tell you the truth? I shy away from the word diversity because
Mm,
especially when you're a person of color, it's not a positive word. Diversity sounds like being done a favor, like, we feel sorry for you, so we give this to you, that you're not as qualified, but we need the organization or the company or wherever to look a certain way. Well, I know and I'm convinced without a doubt, I have experiences that make it worth it for me to sit at the table, maybe
mm,
even sit at the head of the table, right?
yeah.
And so when you ask about my experiences about being a minority, it has been many times to have that in my mind, that I am not going to go in there thinking about so much that other people probably view me as the one hired because I am a certain I've come from a certain place and I am a woman and I look young, or maybe, yeah, I'm young in certain certain
Yes.
quarters. So I have all the three that tick all the boxes, young, black, and woman,
Woman.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And for me, how I have approached knowing, and I go in, I'm not saying I don't go into situations having that consciousness. What I'm saying is that I do not allow it to limit my contributions. And so when I go in, I go in confident,
Hmm.
knowing that I have experiences of people that are often underrepresented and that are important to be shared. Um, but I won't deny that I see it. I see it when I give a contribution and the response is silence, and that when someone else repeats the same thing that I said with different words, it is acknowledged as, oh, wow, what a brilliant idea. I see it when I give a contribution and it doesn't end up in a recommendation for a document, but later, maybe a year later, is seen as important to follow up, and it's attributed as a contribution from someone else. It doesn't mean I don't see it. But remember the resilience that we talked about from
Yeah.
running, from growing up, and the situations that you face is not letting those discourage me, and continue talking about whatever issue it is in science, whatever, if it is in food security, um, and how many times it um, diversity, equity, and inclusion is important in science. And I'm now going to my area, field of work in science, is that many times the voices are about what works and where it works and what is important in low and middle income countries. The voices are not from the people from those countries and who have faced those experiences. It's about uh, importing ideas from elsewhere, and even and I'm not saying that those ideas don't help, but they need to be contextualized, right? By people who have lived experiences from those places, but also people like us who not only have lived experiences but also are as well trained as those on the table to be able to articulate those issues, but also to assess, to advance recommendations and so on. So many times when I sit in meetings of science, it's also sometimes questioning, but have we asked this? Have we thought about this? Why do you think that will work? And so on. And a lot of questioning. I don't know if I've answered what you are asking.
No, absolutely,
I know I
absolutely.
went
I
on a
think
tangent.
No, that's
Yeah,
fine. I think this is great for you
yeah,
to give us a little bit of like context as well.
yeah, yeah,
And we've spoken about you know, color, right?
yeah.
I think you know, in a corporate world, we talk a lot around diversity, equity, inclusion, but for some reason we're not very comfortable to just speak about color and
Mm,
being a person of color. And you know, we both had this conversation about having access to opportunities or
yes.
no access to opportunities because of that. Like, can you share a little bit more from your experience, even
Oh,
traveling for work? Like, how
yes.
does your color actually make an impact?
Yeah, and thank you so much, Fiona, for asking that. I mean, even when I think of recent experiences and access to opportunities, my role, especially because it's a global role, requires that I travel quite a bit and for international meetings and so on. And we'll find that many times meetings to discuss issues relating to what we call the global south, I call the global majority, um, are held in the north. So first, that for me is an issue, and I'll be controversial. I think a lot of these meetings should be held where, you know, we're in the global majority in these countries where we are talking about the issues. But anyway, these meetings are held there for whatever reasons. For me, who holds one of those questionable passports, that means I need quite a bit of lead time to be able to go through the visa issuing processes so that I can make it for meetings. So that means if you tell me about a meeting, for example, in the US, 2 weeks from now, my colleagues from the North can pick up their bags and go. I will for sure not be able to make it because I will not find a visa interview date on time to be able to attend. And then it even goes beyond that. It's not just that it takes, you know, I mean, you don't have enough time. It's also, to be honest, sometimes a bit humiliating when you go for the interviews, right? You go for the interviews and the approach is, you know, the questioning and you know, and I keep telling I've shared with some of my colleagues and they say, oh, I'm so sorry, and a lot of my colleagues say that. And my response has always been, it's okay, I'm used to it. And of late, I'm questioning myself about responding that way. But I'm sure, Fiona, you will relate that that's part of our resilience. We just, okay, this is the system, and this is what I have to go through to get my voice heard and a minority voice heard, and I will overlook this. And of late, I'm asking, should I be okay with it? But even if I'm not okay with it, can I question? And what can I even do about it, right?
Like,
So
is there
it's,
an influence, right, from your voice? Yeah.
yeah, about, so it's those things about experiences and access to opportunities. Beyond even, I mean, I could go further into, you know, how funding structures look for our work, right? The requirement always that we have to partner with someone from the global north. And and for us, what it spells is, we don't think you're good enough to implement. We need someone to chaperone you a bit so that we are sure you can do good science, kind of thing. And maybe that's not how it's intended, but that's the perception we from the global majority get,
Mm.
that, oh, okay, you don't trust. And the thing for us, especially because many of us in science and in global positions have been trained by the very people questioning our ability to deliver. Most of us are trained abroad and so on. So funding structures limit us. Logistical arrangement limit access to opportunities. And even when we get there, it's opportunities for you to be heard, not as a token, but as a voice of quality input to bring change. Yeah.
Absolutely. I like
Yeah.
what you just mentioned. You're not just
Yeah.
there as a token, but you're
Yes.
really there because of your expertise, because you can actually make a change. Now, talking about, you know, having a voice, I know that you are an introvert, although when I first met you, it didn't come across like that.
I am.
Um,
I
so we
am.
are living in this extroverted like society, and I believe you're dealing a lot with the Americans as well. And based on
Mm-hmm.
research, they're the most extroverted society in the world. So being an introvert in these kind of environments where often, the community, the society favor extroverted qualities. How do you navigate, for example, networking or even collaboration, but still staying true to your introverted nature?
Um, I think it's a constant struggle for me to stay true to my introverted nature. I often have to ask myself at the end of interactions, when I come home at the end of the day in a dark room and sit alone for my little 10 minutes before my four children come in, I ask myself often, did I stay true to who I am? Um, and maybe before I answer your question, Fiona, I think I want to share a personal reflection. I think for a long time, I tried to present as an extrovert for a long time because I realized that's what the world appreciates and so on. And what resulted was many times a feeling of immense physical fatigue, almost to the point of feeling sick. And it just wasn't, it got to a point I was like, you know what, Wanjiku, just be yourself. And what I constantly tell myself, including my children, is every human being relates to a genuine person. And part of being genuine is being yourself. And I'm not saying don't try to improve the parts of your personality that need to be worked on. And I'm just saying sticking to the essence of who you are. Introverts by nature are listeners, and that's our strength. A lot of people talk, but not many people are listening. And because I listen, I think I discovered a lot of my gifts. I see people. I see who is feeling left out in a room. I'll often see who hasn't been called out and they have a really valuable input that might give direction. But also, I'll unashamedly praise myself. I think I have a gift I can read people. And that has proved very good for my networking. I can tell people who I'll probably work well with, their philosophy aligns with me, and so on. And so for me, that's how I've navigated in just leaning into the strengths of what introverted natured people have, that they read into situations, they can see intentions before even people speak them. And like you can see, and then you have time to prepare because you're not talking. you have time to prepare responses or actions and so on, and realizing that it's a real strength. What I've also done is, because for my position I'm often required to perform extroverted sort of responsibilities, right? Give talks and so on, is investing a lot in learning how to speak, how to give presentations, asking for feedback, and so on. So just honing that skill. And what I've realized a lot with introverts is when you're prepared, you're confident. So just making sure I prepare well when I have to go speak and be in front of people. And I'll do that when I need to. But I also know for me to recharge, I need to be alone. And so I also recharge for the next time I have to be an extrovert for a certain situation. And that's how I have navigated the networking and so on. I still haven't hacked how to do cocktails. That you will tell me how to. That's a tricky one for me still. Yeah.
No, I think it's great that you mentioned that. It's staying true to yourself, but at the same time also making sure that you recharge, right? And that
Yeah.
you take care of yourself. And I think in this world of extroversion, probably you don't know that fun fact about me, but when I first started my career in the refinery, I was in
Yeah.
my early 20s. I was
Yeah.
actually seen as an introvert. Like people would tell me, oh, you need to speak up more. You need to challenge more.
Yeah.
And they labeled me as an introvert. But I think, like you said, it's with confidence will grow once
Yes.
you have the experience,
Mhm.
once you are self-assured about yourself
Right.
and that you know that you can contribute. I think this is
Right.
then when, even if you're an introvert, this is where you can leave a mark. So
Yeah, and
thank
you're
you so
right.
much. Yeah.
Yeah, Fiona, I think just to come back to something you've said, you're so right about saying confidence grows with experience, because the version of me 20 years ago would never have seen me now, right? And it's time, just giving yourself the grace to grow into it with time and experiences and so on. Yeah. So you're absolutely right. Yeah.
Great. Now, as we wrap up this insightful episode of the Thriving Misfits, I want to extend my heartfelt thanks to Wanjiku for sharing her remarkable journey with us. From her impactful work in public health nutrition across multiple countries to her candid reflections on being a minority and an introvert in the workplace, Wanjiku has offered us valuable lessons on resilience, diversity, and inclusion. It's a reminder that our personal experiences, whether they come from our childhood or our professional journeys, can actually shape our perspectives and also drive us to make a difference. So if you enjoyed this conversation, please share it with your network and leave us a review. You can find us on Spotify, YouTube, and Apple Podcasts. So don't forget to subscribe to the Thriving Misfits podcast for more stories that empower and inspire us to embrace our differences and uniqueness. So until the next time, remember, being different is a strength, and every one of us can help create a more inclusive world. Keep thriving, Misfits.